G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it. Welcome, everyone. Today I'm interviewing Sondre Rasch from SafetyWing, based in San Francisco, United States, America. Thanks for your time today, Sondre.
Thanks, Troy. Great to be here.
Let's start with how we know each other. Trin from your team reached out and thought you might be a good guest to have on the cast for us.
Yeah, she scoped out your podcast. She thought it was cool, so love to have the conversation with you.
Tell our audience a bit about your business, what it does and how it makes money.
SafetyWing offers health insurance for remote teams and digital nomads. And how it makes money. Well, people buy those insurances, they have it on a subscription, and we earn a share of that.
Great. So very niche market you're going after. Obviously, it's booming. Even before Tim Ferriss's book, I guess, kicked off a lot of the movement, early 2000s, but particularly after COVID, I imagine you would have seen quite an upswing.
Yeah.
And how did you start out?
So I had a previous company, which was also like a venture funded startup called SuperSci, which still exists, doing great. Freelancer platform kind of designers. We wanted to provide benefits for the freelancers on the platform, found that nobody offered it, and realized we have to build this ourselves. And because I had a history in working for the Norwegian social safety net as policy advisor, I thought maybe we could build something like the Norwegian social safety net, but available as a membership on the internet. And that's how it got started. And that's still, our goal.
Oh, fantastic. And what year did you start SafetyWing and how old were you?
2018, I was 31.
31, 5 years ago. And the other company, maybe jump back for a second. So university, did you have a real job, then started the other company, or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. University ends at like 25, 26, have a real job for like 2 years, and then start first company at 27. Applies to Y Combinator, moved to San Francisco. That's its own little journey, venture funded company. Eventually finds this problem. Nobody wants to solve it. After a year, decides I need to do this other thing. So leaves that company to found SafetyWing, and and that raised seed, Series A, B, C, maybe. Let's see. Yeah.
And the other company, did you exit out of that company? Obviously, operationally you did, but.
Yeah, I'm still a shareholder, but I'm not associated in the other way. By my co-founder, my good friend and co-founder Frederick, and their founding team there.
Great, they're still growing that one. And do you have some key numbers you can share to illustrate the growth of SafetyWing over the last 5 years?
Yeah, so I just sent this out on an investor update. So yeah, let me open that up. So yeah, if we go by year, 2018, can barely see it, but I don't know, it's like 100K, 2019, second year, 1 million, 2020, 4 million, 2021, 10-ish, 2022, 22 million-ish.
Holy
revenue.
shit, that is amazing.
Yeah.
Over 5 years, well done.
Thank you.
And what about number of full-time equivalent team members? Did you start out on your own, or you had some other team members, and how many you're at now?
We're 3 co-founders, me, Hans, and Sarah. Sarah is the CTO developer, Hans is the lawyer, and I knew the problem. And we are 150 people.
Great.
Of FTEs, yeah.
So 3 to 150 people. That's amazing. When was the moment you felt like you had succeeded?
I don't think I feel like I've succeeded yet. If I complete the product, I hope that I will feel that way. I mean, I have noticed that some people, especially if they're starting out, will treat me as if they think I've already succeeded. But from my first person point of view, I still feel like I'm starting out.
Yeah.
Kind of not starting out, but like still, yeah, like I don't feel like I've succeeded yet.
What does success look like to you?
Completing the product in SafetyWing's case would be a success.
Number one thing you'd recommend to marketing a fast growing business?
I mean, the number one thing is a mistake I made. It's make a product people love so much they tell their friends about it before you try to scale it, especially before you try to scale it with performance marketing, where you can fool yourself for a while. So extremely painful lesson. You just want to observe in the wild somebody actually recommending your product to a friend who then starts to use it. That's like the ticket. Now you can start to scale it with marketing dollars. And then, other than that, I think, there's this idea of mimetic desire, René Girard, that you can apply to a marketing strategy, which basically comes out to a particular influencer strategy, which I think works for almost any product, especially when you're starting out, which is to find who are the top influencers and then, just get them to write about your product. And, a lot of people, their audience will, listen to them, respect them, and then it kind of flows from there.
Well, influencers or influencer marketing has got a bit of heat in the last few years. So you clearly think it's still relevant these days?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, when it's done correctly, it has to be authentic. So I think the thing that the kind of the wrong implementation of this is putting in basically a regular advertisement at an influencer's page. That doesn't work. It has to be authentic, which means you have to tolerate that they might not, be only positive about your product.
Yes, of course. And you use Net Promoter Score. What's your number?
So right now we linger around 70. Our first product, Nomad Insurance, have touched up on 80 a lot, but across both our products, we're around 70 now.
That's amazing. For the audience, it's not a percentage, it's a positive or a negative number. I've written a blog post on it. If you go to our blog, search for NPS, N for Nelly, that'll explain how it works. But it's one question: how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or a colleague between 0 and 10? That is amazing results, Sondre. Well done.
Thanks.
And funding the business, so you're venture backed?
Yeah. So it's what we did both first time and second time. I knew how it worked with sort of venture stages, and so I just followed the most standard playbook. I that was my lesson from having gone through it once is, you might as well just follow the standard playbook because it is pretty good and it solves many problems you don't know about. Which means, and with SafetyWing, I didn't have to, but it was a choice. So, which means the first round is friends and family, small amount, just to whatever small.
3 Fs, friends, family, and fools. Yeah.
So, yeah, the fools, they're often the same.
Yeah.
And then you have accelerator, Y Combinator. I did that again. Great accelerator. Highly recommend applying if you considering that. And then it's a pre-seed round. SafetyWing, we got into Y Combinator when we were still developing the product, so we launched at the end of the batch. It raised what we thought of as a pre-seed round because it was pre-revenue. It was like $1 million or 800K, I think, $1 million. And then we raised the seed round a year later. That's 2019, $3.5 million. And then Series A year later, 2020, to $8 million. And then a Series B, was kind of a year later because it was in the autumn, but a year and a half, which was $35 million. And that was last year.
And do you think you're expecting to do any more series after B?
Yeah, we might do a Series C and then call it then.
Yeah.
But we're not sure. We have pretty frugal business, and so we'll see. We're certainly not going to fundraise this year. Let's see what the market and stuff looks like next year.
Yeah. If you were to start up today with plenty of funding, would you go into your industry?
Kind of defines how you define a question how you would define our industry. So people looking in from the outside would think, oh, we're in insurance. And then, but when you're inside the company, you're like, no, we're building a country on the internet. And so And it really does feel like that. So yeah, would I go into building the country on the internet industry? Yeah, I think that's like, it's funny because even 5 years in, we're still kind of early. Like it's still, but the timing is improving. And I don't know how long it will be early. But if you're thinking about insurance, insurance is, it's one of the last things to be touched by the internet and software. Like most of the companies we talk to when we're developing our products, many of them have not yet digitized.
Yep.
They still have their processes done on paper. So, and just FYI, like a lot of industries did that in the 80s, right? And then they had an internet revolution in the late 90s and 2000s, but they often haven't even come to that part before the internet, much less the internet. So yes, that's the kind of state it's in, and it's frozen. Its players are like stagnant, but it's coming now. But it is incredibly difficult. They talk about regulatory barriers to entry. So there's financial and regulatory barriers to entry. So I've seen founders, perhaps with actually very good founders, never get to market, trying to start an insurance product because they have a cool product, they build a good software, and then they never can make it off the ground.
Because killed by red tape.
Like killed by red tape and needing the insurance partner, which is because you gotta have reinsurance and stuff. So you have this like capital barrier to entry as well. So in a way, it's like you in a way you need like the nod from both the regulator, who is like the most obsolete institution ever, plus this like ancient behemoth insurance underwriter organization.
They still put stuff down on paper.
So like almost nothing goes through. So, but of course, the benefit is that if you can somehow, be relentlessly resourceful across that barrier, you have very few competitors.
Absolutely. Wow. Can you outline the most stressful point in your small business growth journey so our audience can learn from it?
Yeah. Let's see. The one that comes to mind is COVID. So I remember 2 months before COVID, someone asked in a town hall, my co-founder, like, what's the worst that can happen to SafetyWing? And he was like, I guess a global pandemic, because, we only had nomad insurance then. And, with the global pandemic, travel becomes illegal. And, that was what happened.
And sorry, and obviously everyone had stopped traveling for a long time as well. You guys would have been shitting yourselves.
Yeah. But it was also a great time. And it was an odd time because we also launched remote health insurance for remote teams like a week before. We had a launch party here in San Francisco. We were saying from the stage, like in 10 years, most companies will be remote. And then literally next weekend, all companies were remote. So it was a bit of a mixed blessing. It's kind of like, oh, our predictions are coming true. Oh, we're dying. So, and then we had these moral dilemmas as well. Like I remember we had this like coverage for evacuation that all our customers actually qualified for evacuation because they implemented this travel ban, which triggered this coverage. And the funny thing is, if someone evacuated, one, that's really expensive, and two, they were no longer our customer. So we had this moral dilemma, like, because nobody knew about this. It wasn't like the thing you assume it's covered. So we were like, oh. But then we did make the right choice. We told everyone. We're sitting, many nights overnight, customer service, helping people evacuate. And a third did evacuate during that time. But then a few months later, and one of our sort of competitors, World Nomads, they did not do that. They halted sales. They stopped answering customer service. They kind of like hunkered in their bunker. And so over the next couple of months, 20 of their top 40 ambassadors actually switched to us. And from August that year, we grew like 3x while travel was flat and nice. So yeah, the lesson there is, the longer term, comes sooner often than you think. It was just a few months later. And people notice if you're doing like something like cool like that. And of course, it's not without death risk, but that's part of the fun.
And so that threefold growth around that period, you put most of that down to your competitor acting like stupidly?
No, we also iterated on our product and started covering COVID, which was its own high risk thing. we're negotiating like mad with our insurance partners, because again, like many of our product iterations, we have to convince these like extremely risk averse partners, and we were able to get them along with it. And this was still while people were like, "How's this COVID thing going to play out? No idea." Is everyone going to get like long term in the hospital? Because if so, how can you pay an insurance that covers that?
Yeah.
This was still uncertain. So yeah, no, we iterated on our product as well. Yeah, the combo of those two things, resulted in this like mega growth boom in the middle of COVID.
What area in business do you feel you've had to work on the most to add the greatest value?
I would say it's having a correct model about the future. This is a subset of building a vision, but it's like there are other things to building a vision, like understanding what the purpose of what you're doing is and having an ideal solution to it. But a subset of that, of like reality checking a vision, is to have, I think, a proper worldview that is correct, where you are able to differentiate between, fad and real technological trend, and then extrapolate that into the future, because that's a rare skill. It's like a complete freebie, right? And so you can then make choices, and if you're right, they prove right, and that's how you produce a ton of value.
What have you enjoyed the least about managing fast growth?
People problems, like people come with their own problems. People have problems. People have arguments with each other, and then you become like mediator / psychologist in chief, and it's just so it's not building product, which is the fun thing.
Yeah, it's I love that Texan saying, the definition of conflict is two people in the same county.
Right. Yeah.
What do you love most about growing a small business?
I mean, I love seeing it, a dream be realized. I love building a team, like kind of like having a workplace I love being at. Those two things probably.
Yeah. What has been the biggest mindset shift for you in your small business growth journey?
Actually, I mentioned one at the beginning, this thing about, product, make a product people love before you try to scale it. Another one is, you can't get people on a discount. Gosh, the most painful thing to learn. I've learned this lesson 500 times, I think. No, but seriously, maybe 50. Which is, it starts out like this. You're starting a company. You're thinking like, hey, look, on Upwork, you can get like a developer for like $5 an hour. That's a great deal. And that's great. That's like a really cheap way to build our product. No, it isn't. And every time it plays out the same way, which is like through a series of crushed hopes and frustrations and poor communication, you realize you give up. And no, the right way, I've always, and I've done this. It's not just developers. It's like I've had the same lesson, and then in design, and then in marketing, and then this other thing. You can't get people on a discount. It has to be what you optimize on when figuring out who to work with is who's the best people you can find, and then you have to find out how to get them to join you. You can't try to look for the discount deal, because they're fake discounts. They do the thing per hour, but they're not going to complete your project.
Yep, totally agree. The number one habit you think a small business owner needs to develop and maintain?
If you have a team, I think that one is to, continuously, you got to understand your current reality and have interpret it. And that's work. So, I will do that with the team. Like, I'll pick up on something, and if things are working, I'm the first to pick up on some, bad news or threat or problem or something isn't working. And then I will work on it. Right. So what people will sometimes do here, like there are two bad ways to react to this. One is like ignore, and the other is like just like, spew it on your team, like without any context or solution. Like it's just like, and instead, I will then have spent the weekend or last evening, to work through it. All right, to process it. Oh yeah, okay, here's this, And then I'm bringing the thing in the package of a already processed interpretation, which then provides, a healthy way for people then to see the problems, but also without being discouraged, and give a lot of, improve the, certainty and speed in the business. So I find that that's a really useful habit, is just to take that time on your own.
Jump over to growasmallbusiness.com and leave your details to get a short 2-minute email I send on Fridays to help small business owners like you become better leaders. I include some reading or professional development resources I've discovered in the last week. Can you talk to how you've added people to the team, some wins, mistakes, and advice for those listening?
Yeah. I think definitely want to, listen to your gut when hiring. Paul Graham has this line, like, this is one area you can be a bit self-indulgent. If someone seems like kind of shady or not trustworthy, like, evolution has given us an incredible tool to pick up on subtle signals. So don't trust, don't override that sense on your resume. You basically want to like the people you work with, to some degree. Yeah. So what else? Added people to the team, wins, mistakes. Mistakes. Well, mistakes is to look too hard at a resume or a process. So process is very useful when you're terrible, and it takes a while to get good at it. So in the beginning, I would make some bad. It's like pre the beginning, when I was like young, I would just like hire people based on who I liked, and turns out that's like pretty good. And then it was a while where I was trying to learn a structure, and then for a while, like 20 hires, I made like poor hires, mistakes, and I would typically like over apply some method or looking at the resume, and I overrode like the kind of my own take, and then yeah, so those didn't work out, and then after a while, I started to do some right things. So what are some right things? I really like to hire for potential and not experience. Yeah, there are some experience that is useful to get in, and especially like leadership. It's kind of the thing where people have to always go the curve. If they haven't done it before, they're going to make some predictable mistakes. But in most things, you're going to solve new problems, especially for an early stage startup. So you're going to go with them on this first problem you're thinking about, and then in a month it's going to be something else. So it's going to be their general ability. It's going to just shine so much more over the long run than their particular experience. And their particular experience can sometimes even get in the way. I mean, we notice that a lot in insurance, right, which has been such a stagnant industry. That while they have useful information, they often think that it's like the way things are done in the insurance industry are rules of the universe, but it's actually like obsolete things that a lot of industry used to do before computers. It's not laws of the universe, it's just obsolete. So anyway, that's another one. Yeah. So, and then I also really like to weigh, us, we say creative, competent, independent thinking, authentic. I think authentic is a really underrated thing to look for. Like, are people real with you? Because if they're not real with you, you don't know what you're getting in that interview, because people can practice for interviews. So you can practice like an interview style that has like very little to do with who the person is. So authenticity is, I think, like it's worth something on its own, just because at least you know who you're talking to.
So how do you test for authenticity though, or do you just wait for the probation period and then, is there any way you can,
yeah, probation period's good. Starting hourly is good for that. No, after a while, but this only happened after I'd done. I mean, I think I've hired 1,000 people by now, because I hired a freelancer on the previous company. I hired each freelancer as a regular hiring process. I hired several hundred. And so in authenticity, it's kind of like that, like definition of pornography is like you just kind of know. But if I were to put some pointers on some, I would say, do they seem on autopilot? Are they saying a lot of buzzwords? Definitely buzzwords are, if people are saying a lot of buzzwords, it's high buzzword density, almost certainly it's not. It's practice. Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, it's a tough one to test for. I know.
Ooh, I have one more. They talk in terms of I. So like people are inauthentic. That like people are authentic. They tend to say like, "Oh, I think this and that," or like they're talking about themselves.
Instead of we,
And
or yeah.
yeah, you're like third person. Like one might.
Yep.
They're distancing themselves in the language from what they're saying. Uh, it's a clue. They're actually not talking about their own thoughts.
Yep. Yep. What are some of the things you recommend to building a sustainable and kick-ass culture to help with the growth?
Hire people who fit into the culture from the start. Write down a vision and values. Uh, you know, I find finding values, it's things that are universally true. It's a stretch between the real, what you actually are, and the ideal, what you want to become. Um, so I think writing those down and putting it in the beginning, talking about it, thinking through what kind of company you want to be. Yeah, that's probably the number one thing. Yeah, and a lot of people, I mean, I didn't. First time around, I thought that was corporate BS, and I didn't write it down. And then the culture at some point went sideways, and I was like, oh, what the hell? This turns out is actually really important. If you don't write it down, suddenly someone, just comes in and takes your culture somewhere. Like it's yeah, you just make it explicit off the get-go.
Yeah, and that would have been even more important, I imagine, or tougher at the other company. What was the top head count you got to? You said you hired 700, unless you fired 600 of them.
No, yeah, no, it says like 700,
Yeah,
500.
that would have been tough culture wise. So especially if you hadn't set the foundation from the start, you've got to a few years in go back and get it right.
Yep, yep. Very hard to turn back from it going wrong. Extremely easy and low effort to do it when it started out. I wrote down the first version of vision values in 20 minutes, and then it was just there. It's not like you need to, dwell on this for weeks and weeks and weeks, but it's just so cheap to do it beforehand rather than try to fix it after.
And
So
then
cheap.
as the leader or part of the leadership team, then it's that habit of over communicating them consistently. So people almost throw up every time you go to raise them. So it's becoming second nature to the team. They're very clear on what your mission is and values.
Yeah. No, I mean, now we have like a ton of things for reinforcement. It's like it's used in hiring, it's used in every feedback. Like every time someone gets feedback, it's like this person's strongest value and why, weakest and why. Every Monday meeting, someone is giving their take on one of the values. The values themselves are written in this like very memorable format that have a lot of depth to them. I also think they're just like frankly good, which is that they're kind of like the kind of things that you can talk about over and over again and still have something new to say. So yeah.
Hmm. Tell our audience how you've handled balance.
In the beginning I didn't do it that well. I used to be, first company, first year, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, lost a lot of weight. I was not good. I was terrible and kind of crashed. And then I implemented a whole host of things, blocking notifications, doing communications at set times was one that I still kept to this day from that first crash. Um, I read this book, Peak Performance. That was really a game changer. Peak Performance, great book, a bit of a cheesy title, but it really changed my view on stress and rest. So I used to think like stress was bad, rest was kind of bad. And turns out, no, both stress and rest are good when done properly. So stress is actually one thing I was amazed from that book is that that
There's two types of stress. Eustress, which is the good stress, and obviously de-stress is the bad one.
right. Yeah, that's a good way to separate it. So one thing that was shocked about in that book is that the same mechanism when you exercise and you build muscle, the same mechanism that stress that causes the muscles to rebuild is actually the same that is done in the brain cells. It's actually the same mechanism, same messenger, same like signal to the body to send resources there to rebuild and stuff. So, stress just going a bit beyond where you are, right? It's you taking that extra rep, and so it's actually good. Like if you're not stressing yourself at all, that means you're actually decaying. You're losing your strength, and you're shrinking, like kind of like not exercising. And so stress is, in that sense is necessary, but then it has to be followed by rest. And that book goes through the right amount. So for example, you want to rest maybe like 10 minutes every hour or 15 minutes every 2 hours. You want to take one day a week. Another thing I really learned from that book is when you rest, you got to rest totally. I used to have like rest day where I just worked a little bit, or lazily. And I learned that book. It's like, no, this is like a biological mechanism that like flips kind of slowly. It's like you can't recuperate by continue doing reps at long weights. You really have to stop doing it so that the body's like, time to rebuild, boys. So so I started to take one day a week where I'm like, I'm not gonna even look at my email. I'm not gonna do anything. I'm just gonna chill out. And that was a game changer. And yeah, so that's how I handle it now. I really I it's I guess I keep the Sunday holy, but I also place vacations right after periods of like intense sprints.
That's a great idea. And being VC backed, is it a bit of a myth that there's a lot of pressure on you to be working all the time, or you've got quite good control over that? It's just more of a choice because you love what you do.
No, it is a bit of a chore in some sense. I mean, the reasoning for VC backed is that you can scale ahead of your revenue, and especially if you're trying to build something big like we are, that life is short. That's basically the reasoning, and it is a real downside to it. So, one, it takes up quite a bit of your time. I've seen many people fool themselves to think that they're investors are their customers, which is wrong, and that's a way to ruin your company. Many people ruin their companies by taking on VC dollars. They you hire ahead that you might maybe hiring in a bunch. I almost ruined a first company once. First time I raised money, just hired a bunch of people all at once, and we nearly died. I mean, there's many stories within that, but it definitely is a dangerous game. But if you do it correctly, if you keep the focus on the customer and you kind of think as the VCs as you don't more of a necessary nuisance, and of course you get the VCs themselves, right? And we definitely recommend, if you're starting out now, make founder shares. uh, because it's much easier to keep it than to introduce it later.
Is that just for the audience? You mean so founders their shares don't dilute over, or a portion of their shares don't dilute? Is that what you mean?
They have more voting rights.
Yeah, got it. Yeah,
it's a way to keep voting control, and then of course try to keep the majority on the board. Why? Well, some VCs have this thing, like a lot of them are smart and they know a lot about fundraising, and they have some benefits, like they see many companies, so they can be useful for some things. But of course, they can sometimes become a bit confused to think that they, like obviously a VC might be involved in 10, 50, 100 companies. So which means they're not dedicated to your company. They don't know anything really about what's going on. So, but they can be a real danger if they think that they do somehow, and then they are really kind of itchy about their stupid ideas, being implemented, and that can be a real danger. So you have to have a strong spine working with just to protect the company from the investors. How can I be helpful? Well, very often the way to be helpful is just to not get too involved, except to sanity check. Like they can sometimes tell, look, you're going off the rails here, or I can tell like you're not focusing on this. So they can be useful. I'm not saying it's all bad, but I have seen several companies be run by founders not realizing that investors are just people, and they're not dedicated to your company.
How much professional development have you invested in yourself?
Quite a bit, do coaching, definitely read books, courses. We have this personal development budget in the company. Um, I probably spend several hours a week on some kind of personal development. I'm really pro personal development. I think it's great. I think it's an enjoyable activity. Like it's like almost like a guilty pleasure. I think it's fun. I like the process of getting better, figuring out what good is, all those like life skills, decision making, leadership, relationship. I find it all fun and enjoyable.
And you mentioned coaches. So have you had mentors along the way, or just coaches?
Yeah, I've had a coach, Amy, for many years now. That's been great. Mentor, not really. Well, the closest one I had is I, meet every now and then with one of the investors in my first company, Sam Altman, who's a celebrity, but I'm not sure if I would think of that as a mentor, but kinda, yeah, that's the closest. Um, I would recommend both though. Mentor is just harder to find than coach.
Yeah, good ones. Yeah. And I'm assuming VC backs, you've got a board of directors. How often do they meet, and do you have a chair?
Yeah, I'm the chair. We meet every 2 to 3 months. Um, they're nice. The three founders there and two investors, Tatiana and Carl. They're really lovely. Like problem solvers can kind of like zoom out, zoom down. Carl was the founder before. It's quite nice.
Now, you're one of the few we've had on that's exited business operationally. You're still a shareholder, obviously. Any advice for audience listening that may be one day thinking of still owning the business but stepping out of the day to day?
Okay, yeah, a couple of thoughts. I mean, in my case, right, most of the trouble of stepping out wasn't there because my co-founder was still going to run it, and he is to this day, right? So it wasn't like I stepped up, like it felt like we were kind of like still running the company in some sense. I still had full confidence that it would go well. Uh, so that's all nice if that can happen. And then selling shares, you do that as part of the round. Once you're out, there's no downside to doing it. That's basically it. If you were to hand over to like non-founder runner, I've seen that multiple times with other friends. That's always bad. It always works out like this. Oh yeah, we have this person who's like either is one of two. Either is like, oh, this has been the operations person for many years in the company. They know it in and out. They had many roles. Or it's like they hire someone who's kind of like that. Oh, it's always this like operations type person. McKinsey, being CEO of another company. And here's what always happened. They do everything right and they're very like operationally on top of things. And then like 3 years go by and it's like, have they ever done anything? It seems like the whole company is sleepwalking. And the answer is that type of person doesn't make new products or new channels. They just optimize. But you really appreciated them when they were like the head of operations in your company. But when they're like actually leading their company, this is the primary reason I think. There's a couple why all the like really, really big successes of the last decades have been founder-led companies for the long run, like Google, Facebook, Amazon, all of them really, Netflix, all of the big ones, Tesla, um, have this feature because that's, you know, they have legitimacy to make new things, but they also make new things.
The innovation is still there. Whereas if you get this operational person in, they're really just operating the business. They're not looking for, right, what else does the customer need?
Yeah. So if you exit and you're putting in just someone to run the company who is like, you know, best in class, which means that they're a conformist, and then just expect it to just go sideways from here. It's not going to go down.
Yeah.
It's not gonna continue on an exponential journey. It's just going to be optimized to about where it is, and maybe that's fine. But that's what you're getting into every single time.
All right, we're on to our final 5 questions. What do you think is the hardest thing in growing a small business?
The hardest thing in growing a small business is making a product people love.
Favorite business book which has helped you the most?
I like Paul Graham's essays. That's not a book, but there is a book called Hackers and Painters, but you might as well read the real thing.
Any great podcasts or online learning tools used for your own professional development?
I really recommend the original Y Combinator Startup School. Great YouTube series. I think, I don't know when it was filmed at Stanford sometime. It's really nice, really, really good. Still think it's good. Still would look at it every now and then.
I think it was early 2000s. It was almost a documentary called Startup.
I didn't watch it. I saw it, but I didn't watch it.
Oh, it was a train wreck. It was amazing. Really interesting to watch. Just going through the crash, obviously the dot-com crash, this business partnership imploding, and it's really engaging.
Ah,
I think it's startup.com. I think it's the title of the.
okay, I'll take a look at it. That sounds interesting. I would love to see that.
Yeah.
Especially now living through a downturn.
One tool you'd recommend to help grow a small business?
Notion. Everyone uses it. It is great.
And finally, my favorite question: what would you tell yourself on day one of starting out?
Day one, I would say do the big thing right away. Like it's this is always something I recognize looking back, is that hardest thing, the thing you really want to do, is like, how can I possibly do it? I want to do this other thing to build skills. And then later you realize, oh shoot, I could have gone directly. I could have gone directly, and I probably would have figured out how, and it wouldn't have taken that much longer, and that would have just been so much more awesome. So I would say, like, just go straight for the big thing and be all in on that.
Great. Well, thanks very much for your time today, Sondre. I really enjoyed the chat, and amazing growth over 5 years from 3 founders up to 150 team members now, and over 20 million currently top line. So congratulations to you and the founders and the team.
Thanks, Troy. It's been a great conversation.
And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.